Halloween was approaching and I was 14 years old, excited to celebrate as I did every year. The family was getting ready to decorate the house, while I was preparing to wear my favorite vampire costume. That night, the sky was overcast, and the wind howled through the trees, adding a mysterious atmosphere to the scene. After we finished decorating, I went out with my friends to roam the neighborhood. Everything was fun. The twinkling lights, the children laughing and collecting candy. But after a while, we grew curious and decided to visit one of the abandoned houses at the end of the street. The story went that the house was haunted and had witnessed many strange incidents. We hesitated for a moment but decided to move forward. As we approached, we noticed the old door was slightly ajar, as if someone or something was inviting us in. The lights in the neighborhood started to fade, and the atmosphere began to feel uncomfortably different. We stepped inside, and with each footfall, the wooden floors creaked loudly beneath us. We wandered through the dark rooms, and the farther we went, the more I felt something unusual. The air was cold, and strange noises came from above, as if someone was struggling to breathe. We tried to ignore the sounds, but they only grew louder. In one of the rooms, we found an old mirror covered in dust. When we looked into it, we saw our reflections, but something was off. There were blurry shapes behind us. Suddenly, the lights in the house went out, plunging everything into darkness. My friends screamed, and we started running toward the door. But then, I heard faint whispers coming from the shadows, as if they were calling us. That moment marked the beginning of a nightmare we never expected. When the lights went out, I felt as if my heart stopped for a moment. We tried to find a way out, but the darkness was so thick that we lost our sense of direction. One of my friends shouted, "We need to get out of here." We began feeling our way around, but the feeling of fear started creeping into our hearts. We cautiously moved forward through the narrow hallway, hearing strange sounds coming from afar, like something moving upstairs. We tried to ignore those sounds, but the closer we got, the louder the whispers became. We were searching for an exit, and when we reached a small room, we saw old remnants, broken furniture and peeling family photos. As I gazed at those photos, I felt something strange. There was a picture of a family that looked sad, their faces filled with worry. Suddenly, a door to another room in the corner creaked open, and we heard a faint sound coming from inside. We decided to proceed carefully, but with each step, it felt like we were getting closer to something dark. When we entered, we discovered the room was filled with old books. There was an open book on the table, and as we approached, we saw strange words written in handwriting. I felt something pulling me to read them, but a sense of anxiety held me back. At that moment, we heard a distant scream, causing us to freeze in place. The sound seemed to come from upstairs, as if someone was crying for help. "What was that?" one of my friends whispered. We started to debate. Should we go see what's happening or search for an exit? But before we could decide, our phone lights began flickering strangely. I tried to turn my phone on, but it was dead. A wave of fear washed over me. We no longer knew if we were alone in this house, and when we looked out the window, we saw a faint light twinkling in the distance. At that moment, we realized we might be stuck here for a long time. The sounds and eerie feelings made us believe something unnatural was happening. We finally decided to leave the house, but the closer we got to the door, the louder those whispers grew, as if something was warning us not to leave. I was overwhelmed with a feeling of despair and anxiety when we realized that we might not be able to leave this abandoned house. We tried calling the police, but all of our phones were dead. We were in a state of panic, and whispers began echoing in our ears, as if they were speaking of a painful past. One of my friends suggested that we look for a landline in the house. After a brief discussion, we decided to head back to the library room. When we entered, we discovered an old phone in the corner of the room. It appeared broken, but after several attempts, we were surprised to find it working. Our hearts pounded when we heard the phone ring. It took some time, but we managed to contact the police. We're in an abandoned house on Crown Street. We need help. My voice trembled as I spoke. The dispatcher told us that a car would arrive as soon as possible, but time felt like it was passing slowly, and the feeling of danger surrounded us. While we waited, the sounds grew louder, as if something was moving around us. I felt something behind me and turned to see shadows dancing in the corners. We tried to stay calm, but the sense that we weren't alone became stronger. After about half an hour, we heard the sound of a car's siren outside. Our hearts raced as we ran to the door, but we found it tightly locked. We tried with all our might to open it, but to no avail. Fear grew with every passing second. At that moment, we heard knocks on the door. The police had arrived. We started shouting, "Here! We're here!" They began trying to open the door. After moments of tension, the door finally swung open, and the officers stepped inside. But they weren't alone. Behind them, there was a lingering sense of fear and unease. As we made our way out of the house, the officers looked around the place nervously. "Did you see anything strange here?" one of them asked. We told them about the sounds, the shadows, and the overwhelming sense of threat. But the officers exchanged glances. "There's nothing here, but we'll investigate." As we stepped outside, I looked back at the house one last time. At that moment, I felt as if something had gripped us, as if we had taken a part of that nightmare with us. But with the police now present, we were finally safe, far from that terrifying night. Still, there was a strange feeling that the experience would stay with us forever.